Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Can of Corn. This podcast is hosted by Dylan Miller, as well as my co-host Christopher Rosenbach. Baseball season is just getting underway, and we are excited to talk some ball with everyone. Before we jump into today's discussion, we just want to remind everyone to please like and subscribe and follow, so you can stay up to date on all of our content. And as well, if you are enjoying our content, please anyway. Love to hear the feedback and share it along to your friends if you're enjoying what you're hearing.
Yepers, keep sharing it, and we will. Speaking of up to date, we're going to try to stay more up to date with the season coming up, just so that our content is more relevant with the time in which baseball is being played.
All right. So today's topic, we are going to talk about the top 5 corner outfielders in all of baseball, as well as we'll go with top 3 center fielders with honorable mentions, because there's a little bit of a gap there that we'll talk about when we get into it. You haven't noticed by now, we got a nice little graphic here to kind of help follow along with what we're talking about as we're talking about it. Makes it a little bit more engaging. So give us a comment in YouTube, or shoot us a message on Instagram or X or Facebook if you think it's a good idea, or if it's really distracting. Please let us know as well so we can adjust accordingly.
Yepers, should we get into it?
Yeah, let's take it away.
So we are going to be starting out with our corner outfield as our first ranking, and our unanimous number 1 was none other than the last year MVP, I guess you'd say reigning MVP, Ronald Acuna Jr. And I would have put the Enye over the N in his name, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, so it just says Acuna. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah. So we've talked about Acuna in the past. Talked about how awesome that 40 home run, 70 stolen base season that he had last year was. That coupled with he hit 292 on base, 381, and a 537 slug. There's not much reason to debate why this guy is the number 1 corner outfielder going into the season. His numbers were just off the charts.
Yeah, and he's arguably just the best offensive player in baseball at this point. I mean, the dude's a powerhouse. Hasn't really seemed to been any kind of trick to stop him, slow him down, other than facing Philadelphia in the playoffs.
Yeah, and really, it's big that he plays on a team that is as loaded as the Braves is, because he gets all the protection in that lineup that he needs, because you can't just pitch around him and go to the next guy, because when he gets on base, he's obviously a stolen base threat, and someone further down in the order is just going to hit him in. So you got to try and get this guy out, which wasn't very successful for pitchers this past season.
Yeah, because if you walk Acuna, then you get not Greggles, and he's the tight end from the Panthers.
You get Maddles, you get Austin.
You get Maddles.
You get Ozzy Albies.
Greggles, and yeah, that's gonna stay in there.
Yep.
All right, our number 2, moving right along, is going to be none other than nope, go back. Sorry, Juan Soto.
Yeah, the new Yankee Juan Soto.
Yes, short porch, gonna put up big numbers. Already has put up big numbers in the past. I think he's gonna do really well there, and yeah.
Yeah, it has been mentioned by Chris previously that he seems so happy to be a Yankee, and everything that I've seen shows that. I honestly could see this guy sticking around in New York after his free agency opens up at the end of this year. Just to read off some stats for Juan Soto last year, relatively, this was what would be referred to as a down year for him, coming off of what we've seen him do in 2021 and 2022. But even in a quote-unquote down year, he still hit 35 home runs, hit 275, drove in 109, sneaky 12 stolen bases. You watch Juan Soto, you really don't expect him to steal just because of how much pop he has in that bat. Led the league in walks with a 410 on base percentage, slugged 519, which is good for a 930 OPS. Guy is just probably the best hitter that you can have in a lineup. Uh, Often referred to as today's Ted Williams. For those of you who don't know, Ted Williams is arguably in the top 3 greatest hitters of all time, just because of how prolific he was with the bat, and he had an excellent eye, as Juan Soto does. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what this guy does for New York in that lineup this year.
Yeah, I'm also very excited for that. Shout out Boo Boo one more time because I'm sure he's also very excited to see what happens with them. And then we get to our 3 and 4, and me and Dylan couldn't really agree on which one was going to be 3 and which one was going to be 4. I had Corbin Carroll at 3. He had Tatis at 3. I guess since he's up there, I'll make my case for Carroll. Bring up the stats right quick. But last season, really, it was just last season he had a significantly better season than Tatis. And Tatis was coming off not having played baseball for a year because of his PED suspension. So it was assumed he would have a down year. Like that makes sense. But Carroll hit 285, 362, 506 with 76 RBIs and 25 home runs. They actually hit the exact same amount of home runs this past season, which I didn't realize until this exact moment. But I think that it is tough because they're both outstanding fielders. They both have fairly similar numbers. I think that Carroll's going to play better this year than he did last year. I think that Tatis could, should play better. But if he gets in his own head over what happened last season, then he's going to start to just become a really good fielder. And I could also see him moving over to center. I don't just speed wise, fielding ability wise, I could see him being a center fielder.
Yeah, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I'm just not sure if the Padres are going to make that move because they already moved him. He was playing shortstop all the way up until this year where he made the move to right field. And you mentioned the defense. He was the Platinum Glove winner in the National League in right field. So I don't know if they really want to mess up that mojo that he's got going there. But
very true.
I do see with the speed and defense him being a center field possibility now that Trent Grisham is gone for those Padres. But let me make my Tatis case. So Tatis, as you mentioned, hit the same amount of home runs as Carroll. He put up a 5.5 B-WAR, which was only 0.1 better than Carroll. I don't see him hitting that low into the next season. He's a career 280 hitter, so I expect those numbers to go back up to those career averages. 29 stolen bases, 322 on base, so I feel like he's going to walk a bit more. And a 449 slug, which is a career low for him. His career average in slugging is 543. So I think if he gets some more extra base hits, as well as I think the home runs are going to go up. We saw him hit 42 in a somewhat shortened season in 21. So I think if he digs into those power numbers a bit more, I don't know. I've mentioned before, I think this is a guy that has the possibility to do 50 home runs, 50 stolen bases, and win an MVP. Not that Carroll can't win an MVP. I just don't think he has 50 home run power like Tatis has.
And I would agree with that. I think that the way that he could be better than Tatis is from a consistency standpoint, not from a power standpoint. He's just not as big. Tatis is a fairly large human being. I also I don't know. Suspensions make me mad, so I might have been a little biased in my decision to put him lower.
Yeah, and I will never hold PED suspensions. Like, if people are mad at him for that, I understand why. I just think the situation was, we weren't seeing like an early 2000s, late 90s PED just for the power. Right. It was more so him trying to use those steroids to get back on the field healthy.
Yeah. Which, on one hand, that is respectable. Like, you want to go out there and play. You don't want to be injured. You're doing legitimately everything you can to get back out there. You're trying to expedite the process. I definitely get it. But yeah, I don't know. In my head.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to our consensus number 5.
Yep. Unanimous number 5 was Kyle Tucker, if you would like to make the case for him.
Yeah, so if we've mentioned before how the Astros are a juggernaut, and he is a main part of that lineup. Tucker hit 29 home runs last year with a 284 average, 112 driven in, 30 stolen bases. So he was only one home run away from a 30-30. He doesn't seem like a stolen base guy to me, but then you read the numbers and it's kind of an underlying stat. 369 on base, so he had a lot of walks and then a 517 slug. Kyle Tucker's just one of those guys that day in, day out, he's going to beat you some way. I remember in 2022 when the Phillies played the Astros in the postseason, or in the World Series rather, that game 1 home run to put the Astros to tie the game, that was a real dagger, and that kind of just, I don't know, I think that solidified what Kyle Tucker is as a baseball player. He's just going to beat you somewhere or another.
Yeah, I agree. You never know how, you never know when, but he has the ability to at any time do whatever he needs to do to win. And I think he's an excellent baseball player, even though he plays for the Astros. All right. On to our honorable mentions. Not going to go too far into detail on these because we have a lot of content to cover. But Adolis Garcia, big power hitter guy, had him on my fantasy baseball team last year, put up great numbers. Consistency is the only thing lacking in his game most of the time. He was a little bit better as far as streakiness last year. He wasn't like hitting a bunch of home runs and going cold. It was just one game he hit a bunch of home runs, next game 3 strikeouts, one game bunch of home runs, like that kind of inconsistency, which is a terrible version of inconsistency to have.
Yeah, no. And much like the next guy that we're going to get into, when the lights come on in those big spots and the postseason runs, Adolis Garcia he clicks to another level. We saw what he did in the ALCS this year, and even in the World Series, he was that guy you needed at the plate. As well as he had a 5 extra base hit game early in the season, which I honestly cannot tell you the last time I've seen a 5 extra base hit game. That is just, it shows how much of a power threat this guy is. He'll do it with home runs. He'll do it with doubles. He had a 328 on base, which seems relatively low, but he only hit 245. So I guess he was walking at a decent clip, but still had that 508 slug.
Yep.
And drove in 107. I know this guy sneakily was towards the top of the RBIs for the last 3 years in the American League.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was kind of a fun stat to watch for him.
Yeah, definitely. I do feel that RBI is a team stat. The only RBIs that are entirely on you are your home runs.
Yeah.
You can't hit RBIs if nobody else is on base. And he does it. Their offense is pretty good. So that, definitely helps him out in that department. But it also measures that clutch factor. We see it with the Phillies with JT. Runner on first base, 1 out. JT's hitting a ground ball. It's going to be a double play. And they're going to throw him out every single time. So to be able to, have those runners in scoring position and capitalize on it at a frequent rate is something I think is very underrated in MLB right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's talk about Randy Arozarena from the Tampa Bay Rays. That MF Randy. So we're talking about strictly the MLB season, but if anyone watched the World Baseball Classic earlier this year, Randy was a dog, making any play and every play, which usually he's not the best defender. So to see him do that on a big stage was really interesting. Wish that would have carried over into the MLB season, but I'll get over it. But he hit 23 home runs, 254 average, 364 on base. So he walked at a good clip, slugged only 425, which, seeing what he's done in the past, I thought was a little surprising. But I guess really those expectations are elevated by those big moments in the playoffs, like we had said earlier. But yeah, Randy's just a solid guy. Definitely a spark in that lineup. And I think he's going to put up some good numbers again this year. I don't really see him regressing.
I also don't see a regression coming from him. where there is a regression risk is with the next guy I have on this list, Josh Lowe. In his first full season as a Major League Baseball player, he had 292, 335, 500 with 20 home runs and 33 doubles. Yeah, 33 doubles. Those are really good numbers for a first season kind of a guy. He has played up. In 2022, he played 50 games, and in 2021, he played like 2 or 3 or something like that. But I think that if he can continue that kind of hitting, I mean, this Rays offense is already a powerhouse, and if he keeps it up, it's just going to be ridiculous. Their development process, whatever it is for offensive production, is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, and I think he really fits well into that Rays lineup, coupling with Randy. A lot of the guys that we've talked about thus far in this specific ranking have all either been good all-around players or more so carried by their offensive ability. Josh Lowe's kind of the outlier there. He is a superb defender with a slightly above average offensive stats. So I thought it was good to kind of discuss someone on the other end of the spectrum from these other guys. But yeah, as mentioned, he's had a great first season, and there is a little bit of regression that could happen, but I don't know. I'd be surprised if he kind of fell out of this honorable mention category going into the next year.
Yep, and he's another one of those guys that doesn't have a super large amount of pressure on him specifically, so he's not going to be Trey Turnering out there at the beginning of the season. I hope not anyway.
Yeah.
The only stat that I thought wasn't bordering elite was OBP, which was only 335, so he's only about 30 points over his batting average. But he hit 300, well, 292. He basically hit 300, and he was slugging 500. Both of the those are outstanding numbers. And if you compare them to other guys, even to Rosarena, I mean, he blew Rosarena out of the water offensively.
Yeah.
This past season, and he's a plus defender. So I think he definitely has the potential to be in that top 5 at the end of this season.
Yeah, I think the plate discipline is kind of just a younger guy thing. I mean, we saw. It seems like we're always going back to the Phillies bias with this podcast, but we saw Bryson Stott. He was very aggressive too early in his career, and kind of as he's getting a little bit older and getting some more playing time, we're seeing the plate discipline tick up. I kind of expect the same thing from Lowe there.
Yeah. Touch on Teoscar real quick, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so Teoscar Hernandez is going to be our last honorable mention in this category. He is the definition of just offensive juggernaut with very little defensive capability. Although he's not the worst to put in there. We're going to see him play the outfield this year for the Dodgers because Ohtani's going to DH. But it's not going to be a breaking point in the outfield. 26 home runs last year, hit 258. 305 on base, 435 slug. I think he was just kind of not the greatest fit in Seattle, and I think that's why he seemed to struggle a little bit. But I don't know. From what I've seen, his vibes in that Dodger clubhouse so far to start this spring are just off the charts. I think this is going to be a huge bounce back year for Teoscar, and I think we're going to see him put up those numbers that he did with the Blue Jays a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, and I was going to reference the Blue Jays because he is more than capable of it. And most of the time, baseball players don't just suddenly lose their ability to play baseball. So I can't imagine that's just going to go out the window.
Yeah.
All righty.
All right.
On to our center fielders. So I'm just going to put the first 3 up there because it's kind of obvious who the top 3 center fielders in MLB are. Julio Rodriguez, you're big on him.
Yeah.
He's one of your favorites. Incredible defender, outstanding bat, overall outstanding baseball player.
Yeah, so he had 32 home runs last year with a 275 batting average, 333 on base, and a 485 slug. Wish he would walk a little bit more, but it's not a big hole in his game. Swiped 37 bags last year, so he had a 30-30 season. I think if he had a very cold first half and then got red hot at the end. I think if he can stay hot that entire season, I think he is a real 40-40 threat. We've mentioned before that he is in the running to win the MVP this year. And it would not surprise me one bit if he does take home that hardware.
He definitely has all the tools to do it. And I absolutely agree with you. The only thing with him is that, and I've said it before, sometimes people are warm weather hitters, meaning legitimately as it gets nicer out, they hit better. If Julio Rodriguez is like that, then you are going to see him start off cold again this season. But if we see him start hot, then we'll know that that's not the case. But,
yeah, and Seattle is maybe not the best place for
yeah,
that.
not the
Because,
warmest.
but hey, he's there. He got his bag. He's there for the long portion of his career, so
Yeah.
he's bound to figure it out.
You don't think Miami's going to trade Jazz Chisholm for him?
No, no.
All right. On to number 2. Did he tie or break the home run record? He broke it, didn't he?
Yeah, so he broke the American League single season home run record in 2022, where he hit 62 home runs, which was just absolutely nuts to follow.
Yeah. And a lot of times with a guy that hits that well and for that much power, you don't think about his fielding because he hits so well. He is an outstanding fielder. He covers an insane amount of ground out there, and I think the move to center field for him is going to be genius for the Yankees, and I think it's going to turn out really well for them.
Yeah, I'm just curious to see how it goes in away ballparks. Yankee Stadium's got a pretty small outfield, so he doesn't have as much ground to cover out there. So when he gets into some of the bigger parks, it'll be interesting. But I'm not really worried. As you
No, I'm
mentioned,
not either.
great defender. He has a lot of range, 6'7", so he's got the height and stride to get to a lot of balls. And he's sneakily faster than you would expect a 6'7", 280 guy to be.
Yeah.
Absolute cannon of an arm. And as you mentioned, the offensive numbers are just off the charts. He hit 37 home runs while only playing like two-thirds of the games this season. Much like Corey Seager, if he's healthy over a full season, it's going to be really exciting to watch.
And he does have an injury history, so I should have put a little asterisk there to talk about it, because if he doesn't stay healthy, then he is, like, if you get hurt, you're basically out of the question for top of your position every single year. But if he stays healthy like he did that one year, man, I don't even want to think about what he's going to do. Him and Juan Soto, if they both stay healthy for a full season, that's going to be ridiculous.
Oh, yeah.
And then our third guy, who the presumable best center fielder of all time, I guess, if we want to throw that label on him already, which I think he's well deserved. Mike Trout, who isn't playing like he was in his prime, but post prime, Mike Trout is still better than pretty much everybody, with exception to the 2 guys we have above him.
Yeah. So, just for reference, this is I believe, his 12th season in the MLB. He's already at 85.2 WAR. So I honestly think if this guy, his injuries have kind of been overwhelming the last couple of years. I think if he was to retire today, he would walk into the Hall of Fame. This guy is just an unreal talent. 18 home runs, 263 batting average, which was by far a career low for him. But as we mentioned, he was struggling with injuries, but still got on base at a 367 clip and slugged 490. So the power numbers and the bat discipline is still there. Just really, really want to see this guy healthy again and want to see him get out of LA.
Yeah, I do too. And he said over and over again that he doesn't want to leave LA. He wants to bring a championship to LA. And I mean, that's incredibly respectable, and it's really awesome for him to say that. But as a baseball fan in general, it sucks to see a generational talent like that be wasted by an absolutely horrible organization. And I cannot say enough bad things about the Angels.
Yeah.
So shout out Mike Trout. Please leave. On to our honorable mentions. There aren't very many in this list as far as grand total, because there really aren't that many outstanding center fielders, which is bizarre because that's your most skilled outfielder, realistically.
Yeah, I think just nowadays we're not seeing as much offensive production from a center field standpoint. I mean, you think back to 2000s where you got Jim Edmonds and Matt Kemp.
Yeah, that's true.
They're kind of all-around great players of the game.
Yeah.
We're seeing more so of those defensive specialists out there. But we still got a couple guys that are worth noting. To start, Cody Bellinger. 2019 MVP, kind of fell off up until this year. He had a resurgence year. where he hit 26 home runs, hit 307 with a 365 on base and a 525 slug. Took a 1-year deal with the Cubs. Currently is still a free agent, so someone please sign him. I don't know any teams outside of the Mariners, Yankees, or Angels that can't use him. So I think somebody's got to pick him up. He's just way too talented to leave out there.
And I can't imagine he's asking a whole lot if he's still on the market right now. Like, I don't know. I don't know why he wouldn't at least go out. He's an incredible defender. His defense have never dipped. His offensive numbers have been a little shaky over the course of like 5 or 6 years. They just haven't been consistent. But I mean, he's a great defender, and he showed last year that he can still hit the ball. So,
yeah. Speaking of great defenders, let's go into Michael Harris.
Yes.
Yes. As we mentioned, the Braves are loaded, and Michael Harris kind of gets overshadowed in that lineup. But still, last year he hit 18 home runs, batted .293 with a .331 on base and a .477 slug. And this guy is elite in center field. Still have a little bit of nightmares from Game 2 this year against the Phillies in the NLDS, but hey, we got past it.
I think the Braves in general got more nightmares than we did, so I'm fine with it. But yeah, he last year was it 293, 331, 447. Those aren't. I mean, the numbers aren't bad. That's a really great batting average. OBP could be better, but
yeah, not too much else to note. He's solid defender with above average bat.
Yeah. Moving right along to Jarren Duran, who had he was almost a 300 hitter last season too.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he hit 295, only 8 home runs, but he didn't play a full season.
Yeah.
346 on base with a 482 slug. Much like Harris, I don't think his defense is as good as Harris, but he's an above average bat and still an elite defender. And I just see him having a step up year for the Red Sox. Red Sox they're in the limbo of a rebuild, but it's not a full rebuild. It's more of a retool. And I think he's going to be a big part of this team moving forward. Kind of show them, hey, we have the guys that we can start to make a run. I just see him having a good season.
I agree. And his plate discipline is outstanding. I think he had over 50 points between his batting average and OBP. So he's seeing the ball well, taking balls when he can take them, getting on base any way he can, and he still has pretty decent pop, so I like it.
Yeah.
And then Luis Robert Jr., you want to take it away on that?
Yeah, so we mentioned before that the corner outfielders were kind of these big bats, and that kind of carries them. I feel like Luis Robert would be a better corner outfielder than he is center fielder. I mean, he's still great in center. I don't know. I don't know if he has the arm strength to play center. I think a move to left field would suit him a little bit better, where you don't have to make as many big throws, but he still has the range to get to anything. He hit 38 home runs, 264 batting average with a 315 on base and a 542 slug. So his slugging numbers, he kills the ball. And I would like to see him somewhere other than Chicago where he can ball out on another team.
I concur. And I think with him, that is the end of our outfielder rankings. And we will move right along into just our general league discussion for what's going on right now. And that is training camp. And so I think training camp is either completely overrated or completely underrated by everybody. And no one ever really talked so we're going to try to talk about how you should view training camp. The Phillies had their first game today. We're recording this on Saturday. So for people that are going to be listening on Wednesday, you know the difference. But training camp is really just trying to test the waters with guys. We're not looking for trying to win games necessarily. We're not going to have our aces throwing 7 innings. We're not going to have our starters all out in the field at one time. What we're really working towards is where are people good? what are people good at and what situations can we use them and will we use them in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really a spot where some young guys that haven't quite made an impression have a shot to kind of show what they have. Um, Sometimes teams go into spring not knowing what their entire lineup's going to look like, and it's a good chance for those young guys to show that they deserve to be in that lineup if able.
Yeah, and if you're a baseball fan and you have access to watching these games, they are electric, absolutely electric, because the pitching isn't too hot and people are smoking the ball. The end of the game with the Phillies Blue Jays today was 14-13. You are probably not going to see a 14-13 game in the regular season ever. That was pretty cool to watch, and a lot of people see that and they're like, "Oh man, the pitching is horrible. The Phillies pitching isn't going to be good." When pitchers go out for training camp, they're not just going out there and throwing their normal progressions. They'll go out and maybe one inning they say, we want your number 2 pitch to be a slider. And then the next inning they go out, they say, we want your number 2 pitch to be your changeup. And they're going to kind of keep working through this to see what works best. So this is a lot of just experimentation by management and all that kind of stuff. So don't write a pitcher off because he has one bad inning. Because if he has a good inning the next time he goes out or whatever, it's just because they're changing a pitch progression or they're changing something. So that's kind of a good, like, make sure you're viewing it in that way.
Yeah. You want to move on?
Yeah. Go to things that have been happening since training camp started, and one of them is some bad news for the Orioles, who might lose their right-handed pitcher Kyle Braddish for the rest of the season. He is trying to play through it, and he got a PRP shot as of 2:15. If you guys don't know what PRP is, it is a shot that basically makes you feel nothing. No matter how bad something hurts, it just goes away. Is it great for health? Probably not, but it'll do the job if he's trying to pitch through this. And he was a second half menace for the Orioles. As I have on the slides that if you guys are watching the visual, ERA of 2.34 in the second half of the season. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's Cy Young numbers if you do it over the course of a full season. And hopefully that the UCL strain isn't too bad. He can play through it, and he slowly recovers over the course of the year, but we'll see.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the UCL is the most important tendon in the elbow for pitchers. When there's a UCL tear, that's when pitchers get Tommy John surgery. We've seen some pitchers in the past play through UCL strains, which is only a slight tear, not a full tear. Some guys are able to pitch through it for the rest of their career and not need Tommy John surgery. And then some guys, it snaps like a rubber band the next time they try to throw. So I'm really interested to see what the Orioles and Braddish decide to do with that. Realistically, if he was to get his surgery now, he would be available to come back around the All-Star break of the 2025 season, or he could play through it and hope for the best. I really think that training camp for the Orioles this year is going to be big to see kind of what their options are for starting pitching so that they can make that decision if he should get his surgery now or play through it. They have Corbin Burns until the end of the season, so unless he signs back with them next year, he's going to be out of that rotation, which kind of makes you feel like they want to go all in now, but at the same time, going to have to wait and see what they decide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you go all in, it's because you have all of the pieces and you're missing one or two. And so if you start to have guys drop like this, you're not going to go all in because you don't have all the pieces, like you're losing a few. So, but yeah, tough break if that UCL does blow. But like you said, if they go for the surgery, if it blows early season, he can still be back for the end of the season. And as long as that offense carries them like it did last year, they'll be fine. So moving right along to the Phillies signing Whit Merrifield from the Blue Jays. I personally can't even believe he did it. I mean, he said he just wants to win. Like, that's why he's here, is he wants to win baseball games. He wants to try to win a World Series. But to have an all-star last year hitting 272, 318, 382 on your bench, presumably on your bench, I should say, is kind of nuts.
Yeah, I love the fit for Merrifield. He plays all over the diamond, so I really think he's listed as a bench player, but I think we're going to see him slot in for just about anybody when somebody needs a day off. And Really, Witt's numbers got tainted. He had a horrendous September. I don't have the stats in front of me from outside of September, but basically the rest of the season besides September, he was a very solid ball player. Um, Still can swipe bags and field at a really good level. So I love this signing for the Phillies.
I do too, and he is old, 35 years old, but he doesn't have a terrible injury history, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure he's a fairly healthy guy.
Yeah.
I don't have any concerns with that, and I think it's really good because if Rojas can't hit, like if whatever happened in the playoffs to Rojas happens in the regular season, we have a outstanding replacement for him. And I know we want to develop him, but I'd almost rather see Whit Merrifield start in center over Rojas sometimes.
Yeah. Or even start him in left and have Marsh go to center.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Either.
I agree. Then we have the Zach Wheeler extension, which for Phillies fans is a big deal. Wheeler has been I think now the unanimous ace. I think after last season, Wheeler is in everyone's eyes the ace of the Philadelphia Phillies right now. His contract ends this year, and I'm posing this question more towards you. What do you think he should be looking for as far as contract money and year wise?
So he signed 5 years, 118 when he came to Philly, which looking back is an absolute underpay. So I do think not to call him greedy, but I do think he's going to look for more money, deservedly so, because he absolutely deserves it. I would not be surprised if we see a 6 year, maybe 150-ish.
Yeah.
For him. And I think if you're the Phillies, that's a no-brainer. You have to bring this guy back. Shows that he loves Philly and just thrives pitching here.
And to reference the underpay, when Wheeler was on the Mets, he was not good. Like
he had injury history, which kind of made it a little shot in the dark, but he's pitched way above his pay grade.
Absolutely, they struck gold with that signing. Moving right along, the Red Sox picked up Liam Hendriks for $10 million, 2 years, all of it guaranteed. He is currently recovering from Tommy John surgery, but he should make it back halfway through the season. And I think that they're kind of doing this more for next year than this year. I don't want to say that the Red Sox know they're not making the playoffs, but if I was the Red Sox looking at my division, I know I'm not going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I agree. I know Kenley Jansen is slated to be that closer role for them this year. So to have Hendriks, if they do kind of hover around that wild card race, Hendriks come in to be that eighth inning guy, I think could be outstanding for them. Or I think if the Red Sox kind of fall on their feet well, not fall on their feet, but if they get off to a slow start and they know that they're not going to make the playoffs, I see Jansen being a top trade candidate. So then they know that they could trade their closer and have another one waiting for them.
Yeah, and I do have listed a 2026 mutual option for people that have the visual on. They've probably already read it. But a mutual option is basically Liam Hendriks would want to stay with the Red Sox, and the Red Sox would want Liam Hendriks to stay with them, and so they just continue the contract for another year at the same rate. Alrighty, moving right along, we have this one was you. I'll let you do this one because you're the one that sent me it.
So Randall Grichuk signed a deal with the Diamondbacks. He hit 260 last year, 320 on base, and a 450 slug. He's coming off some ankle surgery, but I don't think that's going to hinder him too much. And I think he's just going to be another great veteran to kind of pick up and help mentor this young Diamondbacks team. Grichuk is an absolute powerhouse. He's like Barry Bonds against left-handed pitching. So I think they're going to use him as a platoon role. But either way, I think this is a great pickup for the Diamondbacks. And I believe it's only a 1 year, $2 million deal. So very low risk from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, they didn't shell out a whole lot for him. It is kind of funny. I don't know if the Diamondbacks, like if this was revealed to them after the deal, but apparently nobody knew about this ankle thing until after he signed with them. So it would be really funny if he signed with the Diamondbacks and then was like, oh, by the way, my ankle's shot right now.
Yeah.
On this one's going to hurt you. I know that this was your Cy Young pick, but Kodai Senga from the Mets has strained his shoulder, and he's projected to miss the beginning of the season. The Mets have not released an official sort of timeline for him yet. They haven't said, 60-day IL and he'll be back or anything like that. But this is this was the only shining spot in that starting lineup for the Mets as far as pitching goes. Like they needed him, and he is gone. His numbers I have for the visual people are already up, but for the auditory listeners, a 2.98 ERA, which already is right on the line of Cy Young pitching. 1.22 whip, which, as we talked, walks, hits per inning pitched. So that's pretty good. And he had a 10.1 K per 9 rate, which means that if he were to pitch 9 innings, he'd strike out 10 of the batters, which is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really hoping, at least for my sake, he's not out for the full season. But, as a Mets fan, you just got to be so frustrated. They had all the injury concerns with DeGrom when he was with the Mets. And going the last year when you had Scherzer and Verlander, they all had health issues. And now this year, your top guy goes down. It's just Mets fans are living in an eternal hell right now.
Yeah, and I don't know what Senga's pitch velocity is, but with all these other guys, when you're throwing 100 miles an hour for 65 to 70 pitches a game, you're gonna get hurt. Like, the human body very rarely can do that for that long of a time period and not get hurt. And so I think it speaks volume to going back to old school baseball where the relievers throw that hard and the starting pitchers throw more in the 95 realm, is just because they're not hurt as often.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe he sits upper 90s with his fastball, but I don't think he breaks 100. I think it's usually that 96, 97 range.
Yeah. Because when you think about DeGrom, the guy would sit at like 103 miles an hour with that fastball. And it's like can you imagine the strain on your everything, shoulder, elbow, throwing that hard for that? My shoulder hurts thinking about it. But yeah, heartbreak for Dylan. And so this is where I kind of wanted to introduce the concept that me and Dylan have been throwing around, which is a Philly Friday. And because of our Phillies bias, we figured we could do a second episode sort of summarizing the week of Phillies games that would release. I don't know if we'd record on Friday and release it later that day. It'd be a shorter podcast. But something that just sort of sums up the Philly Fridays, their Philly week, and then sort of keeps it out of our overall MLB content, because I don't want it to get too slated in, here's what the Phillies are doing kind of a deal, as opposed to here's what the MLB is doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good way for us to, both as Phillies fans, talk about the Phillies, but not do it in an overwhelming amount of time for our audience that's tuning in to listen to all around talk. But yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, as am I. I definitely am a Philly guy, as you guys probably can tell by every analogy I've ever made is to a Philadelphia Phillies player. So we'll be able to get that bias out of there. But I think that wraps up all of our content for today, unless you have anything you'd like to add.
No, other than keep interacting. Like I had mentioned earlier, we appreciate all comments. Stay tuned. We might do a Q&A episode upcoming, so watch the Instagram. And once you see that post, comment your questions, and we'll answer them on an episode. I think that would be a great way to interact with our audience.
Yeah, and for the visual listeners, and if you are an auditory listener on Spotify, you still do have the MP4 up, so you can look at this right now. Our media stuff is all up on the screen right now, so if you aren't following any of those pages, go ahead and follow those. But other than that, thank you guys for listening. I hope that you guys enjoyed the content today. Let us know what you think about the visuals that we have set up. If you like them, if you don't like them, some other sort of things you'd like to see with the visuals. It is on PowerPoint, so I can only do so much. Don't expect me going too crazy here. Right? I'm not that tech savvy. But yeah, thank you. Keep sharing, keep subscribing, liking. Always appreciate it.